Well, look, for more on this, we can talk to Patrick Berry. He's a senior lecturer in security at the University of Bath. He's equally a former British Army captain and NATO analyst. Patrick, thanks for speaking to France 24 today. Since Hamas's attack on October the 7th, Israel has spoken of wanting to vanquish Hamas. They haven't done that. No hostages have been freed, and international condemnation of civilian casualties is growing. Your thoughts on that?
Good evening. Yeah, I think we're entering, in terms of Israel's credibility, quite an important phase about what's going on around the Al-Shifa hospital. Because they have previously stated this is the beating heart of Hamas's tunnel network, meant to be a command and control center. The US has also said it has intelligence to that effect, or it believes it's the same. And so I think the clock is ticking to prove that. Certainly, which, let's be honest, are ubiquitous in the region, aren't enough to prove that. So, given that this was one of the reasons that getting to the Al-Shifa hospital was one of the military objectives laid out by the Israelis at the start of this campaign, I'm sure they're under a serious amount of pressure to show the world this command center. And I've also heard recently that they're digging in the car park now to try to look for it. It may well come up, be proven, but at the moment it's not, and it's not a good look.
I mean, you touched on Al-Shifa hospital there, and it's become central to Israel's military strategy. But as you say, no evidence of tunnels or of this command centre have come to light. We know that some journalists who've been embedded with the army have seen some weapons as such. But is that enough to convince the international community that this is justified, these civilian casualties?
No, I think Hamas themselves have published evidence that they have tunnels under Gaza and into Israel, so that's not really disputed.
But under the Al-Shifa hospital, though.
Yeah, exactly. So the question is, as I alluded to in the last one, the question is whether there's a major complex there. And if not, then other people will start to make major questions about other targeting decisions and military objectives that Israel have made. Hence why the importance for the Israelis of finding this. There's a couple of other angles. If they don't, is it a deception operation by Hamas? Make them look, really bad and draw them into another trap, as it were. So that's why I think the pressure is on there. Militarily, if you look at the way the Israelis have set up, they've still got big columns of tanks basically waiting in the outskirts of Gaza City. At some point, if they're going to prove to the world that this is an extensive tunnel network, they're going to have to get into those tunnels, which they've been very reluctant to. Hamas, on the other side, haven't actually massively fought Israeli troops so far, and there's been some heavy skirmishes and a few small battles, but if you look at the last week or so, there's not been much fighting. So there's much more yet to come in terms of the military angle here. And one of the things I'd imagine, whatever there's been talk about occupation, I don't think that would happen. It would be militarily difficult for them. Northern third of Gaza is now pretty much ruined. So whether it needs occupying is another thing. But I think the Israelis are likely to want to keep the ability to enter into Gaza City again at their will, so they'll probably have cleared paths in, etc. Maybe.
Patrick, you touched on the US. I'd like to come back to that. Biden, in the early days of this Israel-Hamas war, spoke about not repeating the same mistakes that America did concerning 9/11. There have been US officials that have said this ground offensive happened too quickly and there wasn't enough time to see how to mitigate a lot of the attacks on civilians. I mean, I'll give you an example. 80 today in a twin airstrike, one of which, again, hit a UN school. Has there been any attempt here to mitigate these civilian casualties?
I'm not inside the Israeli targeting cell, so I can't tell. What I do think is that for international law, the targeting cells must show proportionality and a consideration for civilian casualties. Now, if you've got some militaries in the West, for example, say I did have experience in Afghanistan, where we were basically unable to call in any kind of, towards the end of that, any kind of bomb or artillery or even mortars in case there was any risk of a civilian casualty. Incredibly stringent collateral damage, as they call it, but civilian casualty rules. It's all about, if the Israelis are going through the targeting center and they go, well, we choose this warhead because this is the target, that we think there's a tunnel network there, and 10 Hamas civilians, 10 Palestinian civilians are killed. Well, they've gone through the process and they think it's proportional, and then it becomes into this sort of matter of opinion, almost, as it were, or rule for a legalistic decision, of which it's already been taken. So that's how I think the kind of mindset that's probably going on there, certainly at the early stages of the war, maybe a little less so now. In terms of restraint, look, imagine, I'll give you a counterfactual. Imagine the situation after the attack on the Israelis, where the 1,200 plus civilians were killed horrifically. Imagine the situation where Netanyahu just went, okay, a week's mourning, and just let that build up and let the world see what happened and the evidence come out, rather than this immediate rush to have vengeance. And in that week, come up with a proper strategy, because nobody knows end game is here, and no one that I've spoken to is actually sure the Israelis know what their end game is. They've rushed into this, they've taken the bait, as it were, set for them by Hamas, and now they're into the second and third order effects of that. But there were other ways, and strategically there's a huge amount of question marks over what's going on, I think.
All right, Patrick Berry, Senior Lecturer in Security at Bath University. Thank you.